They threw her out on the street like trash, mocking her tears without a second thought. But they had no idea that the beggar they just fired was actually the rightful heiress to their entire empire. In a world where money screams and morality whispers, Laura Burton, a struggling orphan, is about to face off against Stephen Ford, the arrogant boss who took everything from her. Have you ever felt the stinging pain of being judged solely by your bank account? It's a heart-wrenching reality for many, but for Laura, it's about to become a life-changing war. When a billionaire CEO ruthlessly orders her to be fired, he triggers a chain of events led by destiny itself. Little does he know, a hidden adoption secret and a simple DNA test are poised to reveal a shocking truth. This is the saga of a lost daughter returning not for revenge, but for answers, and the karma that awaits a family built on lies. It's a rich man poor woman tale, but with a twist of betrayal so deep it might be unforgivable. Will Laura be vindicated? Or will the tears of the past drown her future? If you believe that the truth always finds a way, smash that like button right now. Let's show the world that justice isn't just for the wealthy. Subscribe to join our community, and let's unravel this mystery of birth parents and broken bonds together. Life has a cruel habit of testing the most fragile among us with the heaviest burdens, doesn't it? Laura Burton understood this reality better than anyone, living her life on the precipice of survival. As an orphan raised in the cold, bureaucratic machinery of the foster system, she had learned early on that stability was a myth and comfort was a luxury she couldn't afford. Her position as a cleaner at Ford Enterprises wasn't just a job, it was her lifeline, the only thing standing between her and the abyss of homelessness. She attacked the marble floors with a fervor that bordered on desperation, her hands raw and chapped from harsh chemicals, believing that her invisible labor was the price of her existence in a city that didn't care if she lived or died. However, the universe seems to have a twisted sense of timing, striking when our defenses are at their lowest. On that fateful Tuesday, exhaustion clung to Laura like a wet wool coat, slowing her reflexes just enough for disaster to strike. It was a simple, clumsy accident. A heavy bucket of soapy water tipped over, soaking the pristine, hand-woven Persian rug in the executive lobby. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced her chest as she dropped to her knees, frantically trying to soak up the mess with her uniform, her breath coming in short, terrified gasps. She knew the unforgiving nature of this corporate world. Perfection was the minimum standard, and mistakes were treated as capital offenses. The reprimand that followed wasn't a private correction, it was a public execution of her dignity. The floor manager, a man who measured human worth in productivity metrics, descended upon her with a fury that echoed off the high ceilings. He didn't see a tired young woman trying her best, he saw a liability, a stain on the company's immaculate image. Laura tried to stammer out an apology, her voice trembling with fear, but her words were bulldozed by his loud, aggressive dismissal. He listed her minor infractions as if they were crimes, painting a picture of incompetence that couldn't be further from the truth of her hard work. "We don't pay you to ruin the decor. You're finished here, get out immediately." His voice boomed, slicing through the hum of the lobby. Tears instantly welled in Laura's eyes, hot and stinging, blurring the faces of the onlookers who paused to watch the spectacle. Being fired is a traumatic event for anyone, but for Laura, it was a death sentence for her stability. She begged for mercy, humiliating herself further by explaining she had no savings, no family, and nowhere to go, but the manager simply motioned for security. The coldness of the interaction was startling, it was a transaction devoid of any empathy. The walk to the exit was a journey through a gauntlet of judgment, with every step feeling heavier than the last. Security guards flanked her as if she were a dangerous criminal, not a weeping girl with a plastic bag of belongings. It is a heart-wrenching scene that forces us to look at the disposable nature of labor in modern society. Laura felt small, stripped of her identity, reduced to a problem that had been efficiently removed from the building. The glass doors hissed shut behind her, a finality that resonated in her bones, separating her from the climate-controlled tower of wealth she had served faithfully. Standing on the sidewalk, the wind whipping her hair across her tear-stained face, the reality of her situation crashed down with the weight of a collapsing building. The injustice felt unforgivable. She had given her sweat and time to Ford Enterprises, and they had discarded her for a spill. She clutched her meager final paycheck, knowing it wouldn't cover next month's rent, and felt the terrifying vertigo of having the rug pulled out from under her life. The city noises, usually a background hum, now sounded aggressive and overwhelming, amplifying her isolation. It begs the question, how much can one person endure before they break? Laura wiped her face with a trembling hand, trying to find a shred of resolve, but the fear was paralyzing. She was back at the starting line of a race she was already losing, with the stigma of failure now attached to her name. This was the dark valley of the soul, where the shadows are long and hope is a flickering candle in a hurricane. She was alone, truly alone, facing a world that had just told her she wasn't good enough to scrub its floors. Just as Laura struggled to regain her composure on the cold pavement, a sleek, obsidian limousine glided to the curb like a predator stalking its prey. Stephen Ford, the billionaire CEO of the very empire that had just rejected her, stepped out. He was the personification of the arrogant boss, a man whose suits cost more than Laura would earn in a decade, and whose demeanor suggested he owned the air everyone else breathed. He paused to check his reflection in the car window, oblivious to the human wreckage just a few feet away, until the sound of her sobbing intruded on his peace. Instead of concern or basic human curiosity, a look of profound irritation marred his chiseled features. He turned his gaze toward Laura, his eyes scanning her not as a person in distress, but as a blemish on his landscape. When his head of security whispered the situation that she was the cleaning staff let go for incompetence, Stephen let out a scoff that was sharper than a whip. He walked over to her, his polished shoes clicking rhythmically on the concrete, exuding an aura of untouchable power and chilling detachment. "People like you," Stephen began, his voice low and laced with a toxic calmness, "are the reason mediocrity exists.
You don't belong in my world because you lack the discipline to maintain it." His words were calculated to destroy, dismantling her self-worth with surgical precision. To him, her poverty was a character flaw, a visible sign of laziness or lack of ambition. It was a brutal display of the rich man, poor woman dynamic, stripped of any romanticized gloss, leaving only the raw, ugly truth of class prejudice. Laura looked up at him, her eyes red and puffy, stunned into silence by the sheer magnitude of his cruelty. She wanted to scream about the double shifts, the hunger pangs, the nights spent worrying about electricity bills. But his arrogance sucked the oxygen out of the air. The feeling of being humiliated burned her skin. She was being kicked while she was down by the man who sat at the very top of the food chain. Stephen turned his back on her with a dismissive wave, as if shooing away a stray dog, checking his luxury watch with exaggerated impatience. This level of entitlement isn't just a personality quirk, it's a blindness of the soul that infects those who have never known struggle. Stephen Ford had built walls of gold so high he could no longer see the humanity of those on the ground. He genuinely believed his own narrative that he was chosen, superior, and that his DNA was simply better than the riffraff outside his doors. He didn't know it yet, but this moment of supreme hubris was being recorded by the universe, setting the stage for a karma so profound it would eventually bring him to his knees. As he disappeared into the golden glow of the lobby, surrounded by sycophants, Laura was left with his cruel words echoing endlessly in her mind. "People like you." It was a phrase designed to segregate, to demean, and to crush the spirit into submission. But even in the depth of her despair, a spark of indignation ignited within her chest. She wasn't just people like her. She was a survivor of a system that broke others. And though he had the empire, she had a heart that could still feel pain, something he seemed to have lost long ago. Check in time if you could whisper one sentence into Stephen's ear right now to wake him up to reality. What would it be? Drop a single word in the comments that captures his vibe code. Cruel? Let's hear it. Because the higher they fly, the harder they fall, and Stephen is flying dangerously close to the sun. Laura returned to her small, dilapidated apartment, the silence of the room amplifying the chaotic noise of her thoughts. It was a tiny, cramped space with peeling wallpaper and a drafty window that rattled with every gust of wind, but it was her only sanctuary. She collapsed onto the narrow mattress, the physical and emotional exhaustion finally claiming her body, making her limbs feel like lead. Being fired wasn't just a financial hit, it was a psychological blow that stripped away her sense of security, reinforcing her identity as an orphan drifting in a hostile world. In search of a lifeline, her hand instinctively reached for the small, battered wooden box on her nightstand. Inside lay her most precious and distinctive possession, the only tangible link to her birth parents and a past she couldn't remember. It was a unique, antique locket, its metal tarnished by the passage of time, but its intricate craftsmanship still visible. She opened it with trembling fingers, revealing not a photo, but a complex, hand-engraved crest that she had memorized since childhood. This locket was the only evidence that she wasn't just a mistake, that she came from somewhere real. She pressed the cold metal against her tear-stained cheek, letting the tears flow freely now, releasing the dam of emotion she had held back all day. For years, she had fantasized about a family reunion, a magical moment where she would be swept up in a warm embrace and told that she was loved, wanted, and missed. But dreams don't pay the landlord, and right now, the locket felt heavy with the weight of unfulfilled promise and silent history. She stared at it, wondering if the parents who left it with her ever thought of the lost daughter they abandoned to the mercy of the system. "I will find you," she whispered to the empty, shadowed room, a vow born of sheer desperation and a primal need for connection. The locket was more than a piece of jewelry. It was a compass pointing to a truth she had yet to uncover. She realized in that moment that she couldn't just wait for destiny to knock on her peeling door. She had to go out and chase it down. The firing had stripped her of her job, but it couldn't strip her of her origins. Maybe, just maybe, hitting rock bottom was a solid foundation she needed to build a new path. The resolve in her heart began to harden, turning her grief into a fuel for action. She wiped her eyes, the heart-wrenching sadness slowly transforming into a steely determination. She needed answers. She needed to know why she was left behind, and who she really was beneath the uniform of a cleaner. The world saw a failure, but she knew there was a story waiting to be told. This locket was a key, and she was going to use it to unlock the shocking truth of her past, no matter the financial or emotional cost. It's truly amazing how a single, inanimate object can hold so much power over human life, isn't it? For Laura, that locket was an anchor in the storm, keeping her from drifting away completely. She sat up, the fear of the future still present, but now mingled with a sense of purpose. She would survive this. She would find another job, any job, and she would save every penny to hire an investigator. The betrayal of the corporate world had hurt her deeply, but it hadn't killed her spirit. She finally fell into a restless sleep clutching the locket, dreaming of faces she had never seen but missed with every beat of her heart. The road ahead was foggy, treacherous, and uphill, but she wasn't walking it alone anymore. She was walking with the ghosts of her past, guiding her toward a future she couldn't yet imagine. Desperate for money to fund her search and simply put food on the table, Laura took whatever odd jobs she could find in the classifieds. She wasn't picky. Dignity was a luxury she couldn't afford when hunger was knocking at the door. She walked dogs in the pouring rain, delivered heavy stacks of flyers, and eventually landed a gig serving coffee at a bustling plaza in the financial district. It was grueling, thankless work, standing on her feet for 10 hours a day, forcing a smile for rude customers who treated her like an automated machine. But every dollar earned was a step closer to finding her birth parents. Fate, however, seemed to have a twisted sense of humor, orchestrating encounters that felt like cosmic pranks. One sunny afternoon, while balancing a heavy tray of lattes, she crossed paths with Stephen Ford again. He was conducting an informal business meeting at one of the outdoor tables, looking impeccable in a tailored navy suit that screamed wealth. Laura froze, her heart skipping a beat, praying to become invisible, but his sharp, predatory eyes caught hers. A smirk curled on his lips, not of recognition of her humanity, but of her lowered status. He gestured for her to come over, snapping his fingers, ordering a drink with a tone that suggested he was doing her a massive favor by letting her serve him. "Well, look who it is," he drawled to his associates, pointing her out like a zoo exhibit. "The girl who couldn't handle a mop is now handling coffee. I suppose everyone eventually finds their natural level in life." His colleagues chuckled, a dry, sycophantic sound that grated on Laura's ears. It was a public display of rich man, poor woman dynamics, heavily weighted to crush her spirit and elevate his own ego. Laura felt the heat rise in her cheeks, the humiliated sensation returning with a vengeance, burning hotter than the coffee in the cups. She wanted to throw the tray down, to scream at him, to pour the scalding liquid on his expensive Italian shoes. But she needed this job desperately. She swallowed her pride, a bitter pill, placed the cup down gently, and muttered a polite, "Enjoy your coffee, sir." It took every ounce of strength to walk away with her head high, refusing to let him see her break. Stephen's cruelty wasn't just casual, it was performative, a show of dominance for his peers. This encounter further solidified his role as the villain in her unfolding story. He was a dragon hoarding the gold, breathing fire on anyone who dared come close to his tower. But what Stephen didn't realize was that diamonds are forged under immense pressure. His mockery didn't break Laura, it calcified her resolve, turning her sadness into a quiet, burning rage. She wasn't doing this for him, she was doing it for the lost daughter inside her, who deserved so much better than this treatment. Back at the counter, Laura's hand shook uncontrollably, but she kept working, pouring cup after cup. She thought of her locket, of the mystery waiting to be solved, using it as a mental shield against his barbs. Let him laugh, she thought. Let the billionaire CEO have his moment of fun at her expense. His world was small, defined by net worth and stock prices. Hers was expanding, defined by a quest for truth and identity. The Karma Bank was watching this transaction too, noting the deposit of arrogance and the withdrawal of kindness. It's in these moments of deep embarrassment that our true character is tested and revealed. Laura didn't lash out. She endured with the patience of a saint. She was playing the long game, even if she didn't know the rules yet. And unbeknownst to Stephen, their paths were entangled in a way that would soon make his mockery look like the tragic error of a blind fool. Days turned into weeks, and Laura's routine became a blur of exhaustion and repetitive motion. Yet, despite the grinding hardness of her life, her heart remained tender and open. One evening, while walking home after a double shift, her feet aching in her worn-out shoes, she saw an elderly woman struggling with heavy grocery bags on a busy, indifferent street corner. People in expensive suits rushed past her, eyes glued to their phones, completely indifferent to her struggle. But Laura stopped. Despite her own fatigue and hunger, her instinct was to help. "Let me get those for you, ma'am. They look far too heavy," Laura said with genuine, warm smile, gently taking the heaviest bags from the woman's trembling hands. The woman looked surprised, her eyes crinkling with sudden gratitude, as if she wasn't used to such unsolicited kindness. They walked together for a few blocks, chatting about the weather and the city. The woman, though dressed simply, spoke with an articulate elegance that hinted at a different life. She asked Laura about her day, and for the first time in a long time, Laura felt truly heard. Laura didn't mention the arrogant boss or the unfair firing. She simply spoke of her hopes to find her family one day, sharing the burden of her heart. The woman listened intently, studying Laura's face, and touched her arm with a gentle, wrinkled hand. "You have a good spirit, my dear," the woman said softly, her eyes glistening. "The world needs more of that, especially now." It was a simple interaction, but it felt life-changing in its warmth and sincerity. Laura didn't know it, but this act of kindness was a seed planted in very fertile ground. Unbeknownst to Laura, this stranger was actually the former nanny and a close, trusted confidant of the Ford family matriarchal woman who still held the ear of the powerful. She had eyes and ears in places Laura couldn't imagine, and recognized character when she saw it. Laura walked the woman all the way to her door, refusing any tip or reward. "Just pass it on," Laura said, waving goodbye before disappearing into the night. It was a moment of pure, unadulterated humanity in a city of cold concrete and transactional relationships. This is where the magic truly happens. Folks, destiny often disguises itself as a coincidence or a chance encounter. Laura's integrity wasn't performance for an audience or a strategy for gain. It was simply who she was when no one was watching her, so she thought. That simple act of carrying groceries was about to ripple through the universe and come back to her in ways she could never predict or engineer. The adoption secret and the mystery of her past were closer than she realized. By helping a stranger, she had unknowingly unlocked a side door into the very fortress she had been kicked out of. It serves as a powerful reminder to us all kindness is never wasted. It is a currency that never devaluates, even when the market crashes. Double tap that like button right now as a sign of respect for Laura's courage and heart. If you believe that good things come to those who do good, let's show her some support. It's rare to see such light in such dark times, isn't it? Stephen Ford prided himself on his sharp observational skills. He noticed market trends, competitor weaknesses, and profit margins before anyone else. But lately, he found himself noticing something entirely different. Laura, since their encounter at the coffee shop, he had seen her around the business district a few more times. He expected to see bitterness, anger, or defeat in her eyes, the look of someone finally crushed by the system he ruled. Instead, he saw something that confused him deeply and unsettled his worldview. He watched from behind the tinted glass of his limousine as she helped a homeless man count his meager change with patience. He saw her laughing with a delivery driver, sharing a joke despite the rain soaking her cheap uniform. There was a resilience in her, a quiet dignity that his billions couldn't buy and his power couldn't crush. It irritated him, yet it fascinated him. Why wasn't she broken? Why didn't she hate the world, like he secretly did beneath his veneer of success? This confusion began to crack his cynical worldview that money was the only metric of value. Stephen had always believed that wealth commanded respect and poverty invited disdain. But here was this orphan, a girl with absolutely nothing, commanding a type of respect and radiating a light he didn't understand. She had an inner peace that made his expensive lifestyle look dim, hollow, and artificial. It was a shocking truth. He wasn't ready to admit to himself maybe he was the one who was spiritually poor. He found himself thinking about her during high-stakes board meetings, her face superimposing over spreadsheets. The image of her tears on the day he fired her haunted him less as a victory of efficiency and more as a question mark on his conscience. Was he wrong about people like her? The thought was dangerous. It threatened the very foundation of his identity as the ruthless billionaire CEO. He shook it off, telling himself he was just tired, but the seed of doubt had been planted deep in his mind. Laura's consistent integrity was a mirror, and Stephen didn't like the reflection he saw staring back. He was the arrogant boss, yes, but underneath that armored exterior, was there a man capable of redemption? He began to feel a strange pull, a morbid curiosity to know more about this girl he had discarded like trash. It wasn't guilt, not. Yet, but it was the uncomfortable precursor to it. The dynamic was shifting subtly but surely. The rich man, poor woman trope was evolving into a complex study of character. Laura was rising in moral stature, while Stephen was stagnating in his golden cage. He was starting to realize that perhaps you can't fire someone's spirit. You can take their job, you can star their bank account, but you can't take their intrinsic worth. This is the calm before the storm, the moment the wind changes direction. Stephen is waking up from a lifelong slumber privilege. But is it too late? The wheels of karma are turning, and they grind exceedingly fine. He's about to find out that the world is much smaller than he thinks, and the connections between us are far more tangled than a bank wire transfer. After months of saving every spare dime, eating noodles, and walking to save bus fare, Laura finally had enough to pay a specialized heritage agency to trace the origins of her locket. The day she walked into their office, the air smelled of old paper and dust, and her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird. She handed over the locket, her hand shaking so hard she nearly dropped it. "Please," she whispered to the clerk, "this is all I have. It's my only clue." The investigator, a gruff man who had seen it all, took one look at the unique engraving and raised an eyebrow in immediate recognition. Days of agonizing waiting followed, where every phone ring made her jump out of her skin. When the call finally came, Laura nearly dropped the receiver. She rushed back to the office, breathless and sweaty, where the investigator laid out a file on his mahogany desk. "We found a match," he said, his voice serious and laden with implication. "This crest isn't just a design, it belongs to a very specific, very prominent family in this city." Laura's breath hitched. She had expected maybe a humble origin, but the investigator revealed that her birth parents were extremely wealthy and powerful figures. The news was a double-edged sword that cut deep. She wasn't just a lost daughter of some random struggling couple, she was the offspring of the city's elite. The investigator explained that the locket was a custom piece commissioned decades ago by a master jeweler, and there were only two in existence. The implications were staggering and dizzying. If this was true, her entire life of poverty, the struggle, the hunger, the foster home sit was all a mistake, a cosmic glitch. "Who are they?" Laura asked, her voice barely a whisper, afraid that speaking too loud would shatter the reality. The revelation that she came from money didn't bring immediate joy, it brought confusion and a deep ache. Why was she abandoned? Why did they leave her if they had the means to care for 1,000 children? The heart-wrenching thought that they simply didn't want her began to creep in, poisoning the hope she had nurtured. But she had to know. This was the life-changing lead she had prayed for every night. She took the slip of paper with a name and address the investigator gave her, clutching it like a lifeline in a storm. She was ready to face them, to ask the hard questions that had haunted her for 20 years. She felt vindicated that she wasn't just a nobody, but also terrified of the rejection that might follow. The irony was palpable and bitter. The girl who scrubbed floors for minimum wage was actually royalty in disguise. It felt like a fairy tale, but one with a dark, twisted underbelly. She prepared herself for the confrontation, checking her reflection in the shop window. She didn't look like them. She looked tired, worn, and poor. Would they even believe her? With the address burning a hole in her pocket, Laura stepped out into the blinding sunlight. She was no longer just a fired maid. She was a daughter on a mission for truth. The shocking truth was within reach, but she had no idea that the name on that paper would turn her world upside down in the most cruel way possible. Laura stood before the massive, intimidating iron gates of the estate, the address matching perfectly with the one in her trembling hand. But as she looked up at the polished bronze plaque on the stone pillar, the blood drained from her face, leaving her pale as a sheet. The name etched there in elegant script was Ford. Her knees nearly gave way, and she had to grab the bars for support. Her birth parents weren't just any wealthy couple. They were the founders of Ford Enterprises, the very people who employed Stephen Ford, the very people who had sanctioned the culture that led to her being fired. The universe wasn't just playing a joke, it was orchestrating a Greek tragedy of epic proportions. The billionaire CEO who had mocked her poverty was working for her biological parents. The realization hit her with the force of a physical blow to the stomach. She had been scrubbing the floors of her own inheritance. She had been humiliated in the lobby of a building that, by blood, should have been hers. The sense of betrayal was overwhelming, suffocating her, even though they didn't know who she was yet. How is this possible? She gasped, clutching the locket so tight the metal dug into her skin. The adoption secret was far darker and more twisted than she imagined. If the Ford were her parents, then who was Stephen? And why was she cast out into the cold while he sat on the throne? The question swirled in her mind, creating a vortex of confusion, anger, and betrayal. She felt a sudden, fierce protectiveness over her own identity stolen and replaced. This was the ultimate rich man, poor woman twist. She was an outsider trying to break, and she was an insider who had been locked out. The shocking truth was that the beggar Stephen despised was actually the princess of the castle. But knowing the truth and proving it were two very different things in a world ruled by appearances. She looked down at her cheap clothes and then up at the intimidating mansion that loomed like a fortress. She felt a surge of karma loading its gun. This wasn't just about finding Mom and Dad anymore. This was about justice. It was about righting a wrong that had spanned decades. But fear also gripped her throat. These were powerful, ruthless people. If Stephen was any indication of their character, they might crush her like a bug before she could even say Mom. The emotional stakes just skyrocketed to the stratosphere. Laura wasn't just looking for love. She was walking into the lion's den unarmed. She took a deep breath, steeling herself against the coming storm. She had to be brave. She had to face the arrogant boss masters her parents. She pressed the buzzer on the gate, the sound echoing loudly. There was no turning back now. The destiny she had chased had led her here, to the source of her pain, and potentially the source of her salvation. The tears dried on her face, replaced by a cold, hard resolve. She was going home, whether they liked it or not. The security guard at the gate was skeptical, eyeing her worn clothes with suspicion, but Laura's fierce insistence in the flash of the antique locket convinced him to make a call. Surprisingly, perhaps out of boredom or curiosity, she was granted entry. She walked up the long, winding driveway lined with manicured hedges, her heart pounding in her ears like a war drum. When the heavy oak doors opened, she was met not by a warm, tearful embrace, but by the elder Fords Arthur and Martha standing alongside a team of stone-faced security, looking down at her like she was an insect. Laura stepped forward, her hands trembling as she held out the locket like an offering. I believe in your daughter," she stammered, her voice thick with raw emotion. She tried to explain the adoption secret, the orphanage, the timeline, connecting the dots of her life. She poured her heart out, hoping to see a flicker of recognition, a spark of maternal instinct in Martha's eyes. But instead of tears of joy, she saw walls of ice and disdain. Martha Ford looked at the locket and then at Laura with a look of utter, profound disgust. "Another one?" she scoffed, turning to her husband. "Do you know how many scammers try to claim they are our lost daughter?" The accusation hung in the air like a toxic cloud. They didn't see a girl searching for her roots. They saw a gold digger, a fraud trying to exploit a wealthy family's tragedy for a payout. They accuse her of buying a fake locket, of researching their history to con them. "You are a liar and a thief," Arthur boomed, his voice echoing in the grand, opulent foyer. "Get this filth out of my house immediately." The security guards moved in, grabbing Laura roughly by the arms. It was unforgivable. She wasn't just rejected, she was criminalized for the act of trying to find her family. The humiliated feeling from the office lobby returned, but this time it was personal, visceral. This was her own flesh and blood, treating her like a parasite. Laura screamed, fighting against the guard's grip. "Please, just look at it. Look at me. I'm not lying." But they wouldn't look. They were blinded by their wealth and their paranoia. They lived in a fortress of suspicion, and Laura was just another intruder trying to scale the walls. The heart-wrenching reality was that her parents were as cold, arrogant, and detached as the boss who fired her. The apple hadn't fallen far from the tree, so it seemed. She was dragged toward the door, her heels scuffing the expensive marble floors she used to clean. This was the nightmare scenario realized. She had found them, and they hated her. The tears streamed down her face, hot and angry. She had come for love, and she received hate. It forces us to ask, is blood really thicker than water? Or does money thicken the blood until it clots, stopping the flow of love? Laura was being thrown out of her birthright, accused of a crime she didn't commit, by the very people who should have protected her. It was a scene of absolute devastation. From the top of the grand, sweeping staircase, Stephen Ford watched the chaos unfold below. He had heard the commotion, the screams, the accusations, and had come out to see what was happening. He saw Laura, the cleaning lady he had fired, being manhandled by his family's security. His initial reaction was one of smug validation. "See? I told you she was trash. Now she's trying to scam my parents." It fit perfectly into his narrative of her as a lowlife, a confirmation of his biases. But then he looked closer. He saw the sheer, raw desperation in her Aisa look that couldn't be faked. It wasn't the shifty, calculating look of a con artist. It was a terrified look of a child losing her parents all over again. He heard the primal pain in her voice as she screamed that she wasn't lying. Something in his gut twisted violently. He remembered the integrity she showed on the street, the kindness to the stranger. It didn't add up. Why would a woman of such character pull a stunt like this unless she believed it was true? He walked down a few steps, his eyes locked on the locket. She was clutching as if her life depended on it. It looked familiar, ancient and authentic. The arrogant boss facade flickered for a second, replaced by confusion. He felt a strange pull to investigate the truth, a nagging whisper in his mind that said, what if the pieces of the puzzle were floating in the air, waiting for someone to grab them? He didn't intervene to stop the guards' pride and confusion were still too strong for that, but he didn't join in the insults either. He stood there, a silent observer, feeling the tectonic plates of his world shifting beneath his feet. If she was a scammer, she was the best actress he had ever seen. But Stephen knew business, and he knew people. Laura wasn't acting. She was breaking apart in real time. This moment was pivotal. Stephen was standing at the crossroads of destiny. He could turn back, go to his room, and forget her. Or he could pull the thread that might unravel his entire existence. The billionaire CEO was beginning to think like a detective. The rich man, poor woman. Divide was blurring in his mind, replaced by a haunting curiosity. Moral dilemma: be honest. If you were in Stephen's shoes and saw someone you despised begging for their life like this, would you intervene? Or would you let security do their job? It's easy to judge from a distance, but harder to act in the moment. As Laura was shoved out the door, Stephen remained on the stairs, his hand gripping the banister until his knuckles turned white. The silence that followed was deafening. He looked at his parents, who were already complaining about the riffraff ruining their evening. For the first time, their wealth felt ugly to him, and Laura's poverty felt noble. He decided then, and there he needed to know for sure. Just when you think the night can't get any darker, the universe delivers a knockout blow. Before Laura was fully ejected from the property, Martha Ford, in a fit of manic rage, snatched the locket from Laura's hand. "Well, destroy this fake trash, so you can't use it to fool anyone else," she shrieked, her face contorted with malice. With a strength born of fury, she threw the locket onto the stone porch and stomped on it, crushing the delicate hinge and shattering the mechanism. Laura let out a wail that sounded like an animal caught in a trap, a sound of pure agony. "No!" she screamed, lunging for the broken pieces, her fingers scraping against the rough stone. But the guards held her back effortlessly. "If you ever come near this family again," Arthur Ford threatened, his face purple with rage, "I will have you arrested and thrown in a cell where you belong. You are finished in this city. Do you hear me? Finished." This was a false defeat. It wasn't just a rejection, it was an annihilation of hope. Laura was thrown onto the pavement outside the gates, the shattered remains of her locket tossed after her like garbage. She scrambled to gather the pieces, her hands bleeding from the sharp edges, her tears falling onto the broken metal. The symbol of her birth parents was destroyed, and with it, her spirit. She sat there in the dirt, completely broken, the grandeur of the mansion looming over her like a tombstone. The humiliated feeling had morphed into a deep, black void of despair. She had lost her job, her dignity, and now, her only link to her past, the karma she hoped for, seemed to have skipped her address. She felt foolish, small, and utterly defeated. The shocking truth seemed to be that she was nothing, and they were everything. It's a dark moment, the kind that breaks people permanently. Laura looked at the mansion, a towering monument to her exclusion. She had tried to fight the giant, and the giant had stepped on her without a second thought. The unforgivable cruelty of destroying her mother's locket was a final straw. She had no fight left. She gathered the debris of her life and began the long, limping walk back to nowhere. But wait, in stories like this, the darkest hour is always just before the dawn. The Fords thought they had won. They thought they had crushed the scammer. But in their arrogance, they made a fatal error. They didn't destroy the evidence, they just made it harder to read. And they underestimated the one person who was watching from the window, his conscience finally awake and screaming. Laura walked away, believing it was over, but the viewer knows. The game has just changed. The betrayal was public, but the redemption would be secret. She lost the battle, but the war for the truth was about to be taken up by an unlikely ally. Later that night, the Ford mansion was quiet, the heavy silence of secrets settling over the halls. The victory over the intruder had been celebrated with brandy and self-righteous laughter, but Stephen Ford couldn't sleep. The image of Laura's devastated expression was burned into his retinas, replaying on a loop. He waited until the lights went out, then quietly slipped out the front door, moving like a ghost in his own home. He walked to the spot on the porch where the confrontation had happened. The moonlight was faint, but enough for him to scan the ground with his phone's flashlight. There, lodged in a crack in the stone, was a piece of the locket that Laura had missed in her panic. He picked it up. It was a small, twisted piece of gold filigree. He turned it over in his hand, and a chill ran down his spine that had nothing to do with the night air. He went back inside and headed straight for the library, his heart pounding. He pulled down an old, dusty photo album from the top shelf of family archives. He flipped through the pages with frantic urgency until he found Ida black and white photo of his mother, Martha, decades ago. Around her neck was the exact same locket, the The design was unmistakable. The fragment in his hand matched the photo perfectly. It wasn't a fake, Stephen whispered, the realization hitting him like a freight train. Laura was telling the truth. She was a lost daughter. And if she was a daughter, then who was he? The adoption secret that had been buried for years began to surface, choking him. He knew he was adopted, but the story had always been that he was the only child, chosen to carry the legacy because they couldn't conceive. The locket proved that there was a child before him, a child that was lost and replaced. The destiny of the Ford empire wasn't his by blood, it was hers. The arrogant boss felt the ground crumble beneath his feet. He had fired his own sister. He had mocked the rightful heir. The karma was sickening, making his stomach turn. Stephen sat in the dark library, the piece of gold burning a hole in his palm. The shocking truth was staring him in the face. He looked at the portrait of his parents on the wall of the people who had just destroyed their own daughter's hope. They were monsters, or they were deeply deluded. Either way, Stephen was now the keeper of the secret that could destroy everything. He pocketed the fragment. He couldn't undo the past, but he could change the future. For the first time in his life, Stephen Ford wasn't thinking about profit margins or public image. He was thinking about justice. He had to be sure, absolutely sure. And for that, he needed science, not just sentiment. Stephen was a man of action, and the next morning, he moved with cold precision. Instead of going to his executive suite, he went to the cleaning supply room at Ford Enterprises. He found the locker that used to belong to Laura. It hadn't been cleared out yet. He searched through it, his hand shaking slightly, finding an old hairbrush she had left behind. He pulled a few strands of hair from the bristles. It felt intrusive, like a violation, but it was necessary to uncover the truth. He took the sample, along with a sample of his own, and a discreetly acquired sample from his father's comb to a private, high-security lab he used for sensitive corporate matters. He paid triple for an expedited rush order, demanding absolute confidentiality. "I need these results yesterday," he told the technician, his billionaire CEO authority in full swing. The wait was agonizing. He paced the waiting room, his mind replaying every interaction he ever had with Laura. Every insult, every sneer, every moment he treated her like dirt. When the results came back, the envelope felt heavy in his hands, like it contained lead. He opened it. The data was irrefutable. Laura Burton, 99. 9 probability of parentage, with Arthur Ford. Stephen Ford, 0 probability. The shocking truth was confirmed in black and white ink. Laura was a biological daughter. He was a stand-in, the adopted son brought in to fill the void when she went missing or was given up. The weight of the betrayal was immense. His parents had lied to him his whole life, or at least omitted the truth of his sister. But worse, they had treated their own flesh and blood like garbage. Stephen felt a mix of anger and shame that was almost blinding. He was living her life, sleeping in her house, spending her money. The empire he thought was his birthright was actually stolen property. He looked at the DNA test again. It was a document that could destroy the family or heal it. It was life-changing. He thought of Laura, out there somewhere, believing she was crazy, believing she was unwanted. He was the only person in the world who knew she was right. The orphan wasn't an orphan at all. She was a queen in exile, and he was the usurper. Stephen drove his car aimlessly through the city, the revelation sinking in. The rich man, poor woman dynamic had flipped. He was a fraud, she was a real deal. He felt a tear slide down his cheek, a rare occurrence for Stephen Ford. It was a tear of regret and awakening. He realized that the arrogant boss had to die so the brother could be born. He couldn't keep this secret. The karma would eat him alive if he did. He had to find her. He had to fix this. Stephen stood on the precipice of a monumental decision that would define his soul. He could burn the DNA results. He could go back to his mansion, keep his inheritance, and live out his days as the sole heir. No one would ever know. Laura would disappear into the poverty she came from, and his life of luxury would continue uninterrupted. It was an easy choice. It was a choice the old Stephen would have made in a heartbeat. But the image of Laura's kindness, her resilience, and her tears wouldn't leave him. He realized that if he buried the truth, He would be no better than the parents who kicked her out. He would be a thief of the worst kind, stealing a life. The moral dilemma gnawed at him, but deep down, the answer was already there. He chose redemption. He chose to be a human being rather than a CEO. He hired a private investigator to track Laura down, finding her in a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. He drove there himself, stripping off his expensive tie and leaving his ego in the car. When he knocked on the door, Laura opened it, looking pale, defeated, and terrified. Seeing him, she tried to slam the door, convinced he was there to arrest her as threatened. "Wait!" Stephen shouted, jamming his foot in the door, desperation in his voice. "I'm not here to hurt you. I'm here to apologize." The words felt foreign on his tongue, but they were sincere. Laura paused, confused. The arrogant boss was apologizing? He pushed the door open gently and handed her the DNA results. "You were right," he said, his voice breaking. "You are the lost daughter. And I'm your brother." Laura read the paper, her hands trembling violently. The vindicated feeling washed over her, so powerful she nearly collapsed. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't a scammer. She was a Ford. She looked at Stephen, seeing not the cruel tyrant, but a man seeking forgiveness. "Why are you doing this?" she asked, tears streaming down her face. "You could lose everything." "Because it's the right thing to do," Stephen replied, looking her in the eye. "And because you don't deserve what happened to you." "I was wrong, Laura, about everything." It was a moment of pure, raw honesty. The rich man, poor woman barrier dissolved, leaving just two siblings connected by a twisted destiny. He told her to pack her things. "We're going back," he said firmly, "not to beg, to claim what's yours." Laura hesitated, fear warring with hope, but seeing the conviction in Stephen's eyes gave her strength. She wasn't going back alone this time. She had a protector. This is a turning point. The villain becomes a hero. The victim becomes a victor. It's a heart-wrenching journey to get here, but the payoff is about to be legendary. Stephen chose truth over money, and in doing so, he finally became rich in the ways that matter. The Ford mansion was ablaze with lights, looking like a diamond dropped in the night. It was the night of the annual charity gala, the most high society event of the year. The city's elite were there, drinking champagne and toasting the Ford family's generosity and hypocrisy that made Stephen sick to his stomach. He walked in through the main doors, Laura by his side. She was dressed in a stunning gown he had bought for her, looking every bit the heiress she was born to be. The room fell silent as they entered. Whispers rippled through the crowd like a wildfire. "Isn't that the maid?" Who was she with Stephen? Arthur and Martha Ford froze, their champagne glasses hovering halfway to their lips. They looked like they had seen a ghost. Stephen marched Laura right up to the stage, taking the microphone from the confused MC. "Ladies and gentlemen," Stephen announced, his voice booming with a new kind of authority that commanded absolute silence. "You know us as the Ford family, a pillar of this community. But a pillar is only as strong as its foundation, and ours is built on a lie." The crowd gasped. The billionaire CEO was going off script. Arthur started to move toward the stage, his face pale, but Stephen held up a hand. "This woman," he gestured to Laura, "is not a stranger. She is not a scammer. She is Laura Ford, the biological daughter of Arthur and Martha Ford, who was lost and then discarded by the very people who should have loved her." He projected the DNA results onto the massive screen behind him. The shocking truth was now public knowledge. The silence in the room was absolute, the tension thick enough to cut with a knife. "I was adopted to replace her," Stephen continued, looking at his parents with a mix of pity and judgment. "But no one can replace the truth. We fired her. We mocked her. We broke her locket. But we couldn't break her bloodline. The betrayal was laid bare for all of high society to see. The parents looked small, shrunken by the weight of their own secrets exposed to the light. Laura stood tall, tears glistening in her eyes, but this time they were tears of strength. She looked at the crowd, then at her parents. She didn't say a word. Her presence was the loudest statement possible. The arrogant boss had just dismantled his own empire to build a home for his sister. The karma was instantaneous and brutal. The whispers turned to looks of open judgment toward the parents. The facade of the perfect family shattered into a million pieces. It was a life-changing spectacle. The truth didn't just come out, it exploded. Stephen had dropped a nuclear bomb of honesty, and the fallout was magnificent. In the aftermath of the revelation, the scene on the stage was intimate and painful. Arthur and Martha Ford, stripped of their defenses and their pride, fell to their knees. The public shame was one thing, but the undeniable proof of their own cruelty toward their own child broke them. They reached out to Laura, begging for forgiveness, their voices cracking with regret. "We didn't know. We were so afraid." They sobbed, looking like shells of their former selves. Laura looked down at them. She could have spurned them. She could have unleashed a lifetime of anger, demanded they be fired from their own lives, and reveled in their humiliated state. It would have been justified. But Laura wasn't like them. She possessed a grace that money couldn't buy. She knelt down, not to join them in the dirt, but to look them in the eye. "I forgive you," she said softly, her voice carrying across the silent room. "Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve peace." It was a moment of unforgivable actions meeting ultimate mercy. The crowd watched in awe. However, forgiveness didn't mean forgetting. Laura stood up and turned to Stephen. "But I can't stay here," she whispered. "This house isn't a home. It's a museum of secrets." She chose to leave. And in a final twist of destiny, Stephen took off his expensive watch, laid it on the podium, and walked after her. "I'm coming with you," he said. The billionaire CEO walked away from the empire, the inheritance, and the title. He chose his sister. He chose reality over the illusion of wealth. They walked out of the mansion together, leaving the stunned parents and the silent gal behind. They had nothing but each other, yet they had everything. The rich man, poor woman, labels no longer applied. They were just family, vindicated by truth and bound by love. Stephen had finally learned the lesson that Laura had known all along: love is worth more than any empire. As they stepped into the cool night air, the burden of the lie lifted off Stephen's shoulders. He breathed freely for the first time in his life. The orphan had found her brother, and the prince had found his soul. How are you feeling right now? If this story touched your heart, drop in the comments. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes you have to lose everything to find what truly matters. Laura's journey teaches us a powerful lesson. Your bank account doesn't define your worth, your heart does. Stephen found true redemption not in his massive inheritance, but in the courage to stand up for the truth, proving that while money can build a house, only love can build a home. If you also believe that integrity is the only currency that really matters, then you found your place. Subscribe right now and join a community that values the soul over the status. Let's make some noise for kindness. Smash that like button to help this message of hope reach every corner of the world. Comment below with your honest thought. If you were Laura, would you have forgiven them? I really want to hear your perspective. And share this video as a personal mission to remind someone today that even in their darkest hour, they are never truly alone. And while you catch your breath, know that this channel is a treasure chest of emotions waiting to be opened. Dive into our older videos to discover other unforgettable journeys, just like this one. And to ensure you don't miss the incredible stories we are cooking up for you, ring that notification bell to stay updated. Trust me, you won't want to be left out of the next emotional roller coaster.